Hello, my name is Dylan Rosenthal, and I am an ensemble librarian for the Interlochen Center for the Arts. I wanted to make a Photoshop tutorial series basically talking about how we use Photoshop in our library and allow our interns, both former and prospective, to have a reference guide on how to use Photoshop in their future careers. However, if you are a fully fledged ensemble librarian or orchestra librarian who's watching this video now, I hope that you can get something out of it. There may be some things that are different than how you use Photoshop in your library. There might be some things that are new, but overall, I hope that it's useful in some capacity. Who is this series for? As I just said, the series is mostly targeted towards ensemble library interns, both at academic institutions as well as at orchestral settings. We're going to talk a lot about basic fixes that Photoshop can be used for and talk about it through that frame of reference rather than going into like a global analysis of Photoshop and all of its tools. It's mostly targeted towards summer interns, and if they need to fix something quickly, they can watch this series and find a solution. I will say and acknowledge that there is a Photoshop series that exists already by Justin Vibard that is also very comprehensive and is more of a deep dive into the global workings of Photoshop and sort of the philosophy of Photoshop. But this series is mostly targeted towards how to fix things and being a reference point for those problems. What is Photoshop and why do librarians use it? Photoshop is a photo editing software primarily, but librarians use it to edit documents, edit musical parts, to improve them for our performers. It is very, very good at editing things that are a little bit too complicated for Adobe Acrobat, but not to the point of having to re-engrave the entire part. Things like fixing errata, fixing page turns, stuff like that. Photoshop is usually pretty good at it, and that's the main use that we use in our library. We'll get into that at a later episode. What are the strengths and weaknesses of Photoshop? So Photoshop is primarily a photography editing software or graphic design editing software. So it's really, really good at detecting things that photographers and graphic designers will encounter on a day-to-day basis. It even has some AI tools now that are extremely powerful for photo editing software, or for photo editing in general. But for us, these tools are not as advanced. Photoshop, for example, does not know the difference between an accent and a pencil marking, or a mistake, or like a staccato and a dust or a scratch. So sometimes some of the tools that exist in Photoshop are a double-edged sword. They're very, very powerful, but sometimes they can be a bit dumb, let's say. They don't target things in the way that you would think they intuitively would. So the strength is that it's very powerful, but it's not necessarily targeted for what we are doing. It is not intended to be a file editing software. But for what we're using it for, it's very powerful. Okay, in this first episode, I wanted to talk mostly about essential shortcuts and keystrokes that are used when editing files in Photoshop, and also opening files and saving them briefly. Talk about that briefly. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about with Photoshop is going to be opening files. It is very difficult to open files in Photoshop in one document. There is a way to do it, but it honestly is worse than opening everything as its own file. So the way that it looks when you open things, let's say you're opening a PDF in Photoshop, is that you're going to get this box, and you're going to have all these photos in this box, or all these pages in this box. If you just open it now, it would only open page 1, and that's really annoying. I want to open everything. So the way that you open everything is by holding down the Shift key and clicking through, and now everything will open when I try to open it. Some people like to open things in reverse order. So instead of it going 1, 2, 3 from left to right, it will go 1, 2, 3 from right to left. I honestly prefer it to be from left to right. You can also change image size here as well and other things, but just make sure it's in black and white or grayscale, and that should be good to go. Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about, the first shortcut, is going to be the marquee tool. I should say that all of these shortcuts will be linked below in the description of this video if you want to go back and see them. The marquee tool is going to be used with the shortcut M. And what the marquee tool does is that it selects things within your file to edit them. So when I use the marquee tool, I am selecting things to do something else too. So I can like move them, I can rotate them, or whatever. I can delete them, I can fill with white, whatever. I can do lots of things to whatever I end up wanting to select. But the marquee tool is going to be home base for a lot of different actions. And that will be with, once again, shortcut M. The next tool that is very helpful and often used in conjunction with the marquee tool is the move tool, which is V. When I click V, I am allowing myself to do lots of different actions to whatever I have selected. So I can either move whatever I've selected, I can rotate it, I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, and then if I want to right click, I can do a lot of other things. I can distort it, I can fix the perspective, whatever. I can do lots of different things with the move tool. And once again, that will be using the shortcut V. The next tool I want to talk about in shortcut is going to be the brush tool and the eraser tool. These tools are basically two sides of the same coin, where one fills things with a color and one gets rid of things. So let's talk about the brush tool first. The brush tool is going to be using the keystroke B, and that will allow you to use the brush. If you want to select a color for the brush that's already in your file, you can hold the Option key, select the color you want, and now when you go to use it, it's that color. So let's say I want to make a staccato dot for this. It's black, and now it's black. Look at that. Or let's say I want to draw like a legato or a slur or something. I can do that as well. Whatever I want to do. The other side of that coin is the eraser tool, which allows me to delete things out of the photo. So, like so. This transparency, we'll get back to that in a second. We do not want that, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay. The last shortcut I want to talk about when using brush tools like the brush or the eraser tool is going to be how to make the tool bigger or smaller. So the way that you do that is by holding the Control and Option button simultaneously, and then dragging the mouse from left to right to change the size of the brush, or up and down to change the hardness of the brush. Very, very useful when working with lots of different markings within the file. Okay, let's talk about this transparency. Obviously, we don't want that. We don't want our file to have transparent parts of it. So the way that we fix that is by using a series of shortcuts to create a background. And the way that you do that is with the following shortcuts. The first one that you'll want to use will be the Command-Shift-N shortcut, which will create a new layer. This layer is going to eventually become our background. Unfortunately, you cannot fill this layer with white off the bat, which is really annoying, but we will get to that in a second. Make sure that no colors selected, and that should be good. So we don't want this layer to be here, because when we go to fill it with white, it is going to be above layer 1, and then I'll show you what happens when you do that. So to make the background white, you're going to use the shortcut Shift F5, which is the fill shortcut, which will fill it with whatever color you want. It could be black, white, or something else. We're going to want white in 100% opacity, and it will fill with white. And that's why you don't want it to be on top, because now the whole image is white, which is not what we want. So you're going to click and drag layer 2 to be behind layer 1, and now your transparency is gone. There is no transparency. The last thing that I like to do, if I'm making sure that this is going to actually be a background, is going to be to lock it. So to lock a layer, the command is going to be command backstroke, and now the layer is locked. I can't do anything to it. I can't erase it. I can't brush it. I can't marquee and move anything. So that's very helpful for not screwing up my background. I don't want it to be plain white. Okay. The next shortcut that I want to talk about is going to be the J shortcuts. So when you're editing things in Photoshop, there are times where you want to, say, move this forte or make another one, and you don't want it to be part of the layer that you're currently using. So the way that you do that is you're going to want to select with your marquee tool whatever you want to edit, and the first shortcut I want to talk about is the Command J shortcut. So Command J, and that is going to duplicate what I've selected as a new layer, copy as a new layer. So now it looks like nothing's happened, but when I go to select this layer and move it, I have another forte. And I can put it wherever I want. Very, very, very helpful tool. However, let's say I just want to move this forte. I don't want it to be duplicated, but I also, I want it to be its own layer because I want to do some changes to something else. Instead of hitting Command J, I'm going to hit Command Shift J, which is cut via layer. And now when I go to move the forte, it's independent and it's not a copy. And it's its own layer. See, it's not part of anything else. Which becomes very helpful if you're doing a lot of intricate editing, which we might get to later. Okay. Okay. Actually, I want to go back one. So, the next command group that I want to talk about is going to be the merge commands. So, the basic merge command is going to be merge down, which will be whatever layer you have selected. It will merge the layer as well as the layer below it. So let's say I want to put this forte back in layer 1. The way that I would do that is I would hit Command and E, and now these are combined. Now when I go to make things invisible, the forte is not visible because it's part of layer 1. Let's say I want to flatten this image. I want all of this to be one layer again. I don't want layers. The other merge tool that's very important is going to be Command Shift E. So now everything is merged and is visible. Critically, this is not flattening the image. This is just merging everything visible, but you can still flatten this. Why? I'm not really quite sure. It is the only layer now, and it basically merges every visible layer, but it's not flattened. And that becomes important when saving. Okay. Some other commands and shortcuts that I've been using during this entire presentation are going to be like quality of life things. So let's say you're moving around this document and you want to get somewhere quickly. No matter what tool you have selected, whether it be brush tools, marquee tools, or whatever, if you hold the space bar and then drag, you can move across the canvas without moving or selecting anything. It's very, very helpful. Also, if you hold the Option key and scroll with your mouse, you can zoom in and out very, very easily. The last quality of life shortcut that I like to use, especially when I'm editing larger documents, such as like 10-page documents or something, is going to be the Command Backstick, which is this, which allows you to cycle through your open files. Very, very, very helpful. As well as Command Shift Backstick, which allows you to cycle the other way as well. Like that. Okay. And then there's the basic ones, obviously. There's like Command C for copy, same as like Word documents and stuff. And then Command Z is undo, and then Command Shift Z is put back. The very last thing I did want to talk about was marquee tool shortcuts. So let's say I want to select, where was I? Select this piano. It's very annoying to select this piano because there is a dot in the way. And I don't want that dot. So I want this piano, I don't want this dot. The way that I would get rid of this dot from the selection is by holding the Option key and then selecting the dot. This removes the dot from the selected material. And now when I go to move it, it moves on its own. However, let's say I want the dot and I also want the pizzicato marking. If I hold down the Shift key instead of the Option key, I can select the pits and the dot, and now it's all one, meaning I can move it as one unit or do whatever I want to it as one unit. This becomes very helpful when doing one action to lots of things. So let's say I want to get rid of all of these bowings. If I hold down the Shift key while moving around like this, I only need to hit Shift F5 once to get rid of them all. So if I'm going to do one action to multiple parts of the file, the Shift and the Option marquee tool is extremely helpful. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I think I've said that 3 times, but the real last thing I want to talk about is going to be saving after you've done your editing. So a lot of people do this differently. The one thing that basically everyone agrees on is that you're going to want to flatten this image. You want to at least flatten it because if you save this with layers in it, it's going to be much bigger than if you save it as its own file. Or if you save it as a grayscale image. A step further that I like to take it is by turning this into a bitmap. Now, a bitmap is basically just turning things into ones and zeros. So anything that's black is a 1, and anything that's white is a 0. There's no gray, there's no variance. And this saves a bit of space. So now when I go to save this, it's going to be extremely small. So I'll go to Control Save. Make sure that this is a TIFF, not a PDF. I'll show you why in a second. Make sure you're selecting LZW compression because it's not a very aggressive compression type. And now, when I go to the file, it is extremely small. It's also extremely crisp. It has basically, it has no blurring. When you save things as a Photoshop PDF, it blurs a lot of things. When you save it as a bitmap, it really does not do anything. It does not change the clarity of the file basically at all. And the way that you can tell is by going to 100% zoom, because that's where the true variation can be witnessed. And if you go back and forth, it doesn't change. However, let's say I wanted to save this as a PDF rather than a TIFF. And I didn't want it to be blurry or look bad in any way. Let's say I want it to be 300, 450, which is pretty big, but not that big. And then still compression with JPEG, maximum or high image quality. And I go to save this as PDF. I'll show you that file is 10 times larger than the other one, than the TIFF. And this is for just one page. So you can imagine if you're editing multiple pages in a file, your file is going to be 10 times bigger than if you save it as a bitmap TIFF. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay. That is all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for sitting through this presentation, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you.